I'd like to welcome you this evening to the McDowell County Republican Primary Candidate Forum for the 47th Senate District, which includes McDowell County. Tonight we're going to ask both candidates a series of questions in which they will have 5 minutes each to answer. Going first tonight is candidate Michael Lavender. Mr. Lavender, education has become an issue of debate during the current legislature. The legislature voted to end teacher tenure. The legislature has set teacher pay raises as a priority this year. What is your position on how the legislature has handled or plans to handle tenure and teacher pay?
Thank you, Mr. Effler. I think our legislators know that they're in a bit of trouble. I think they're going to offer pay raises this year. It has been since 2008 that they have offered only one pay raise of 1.2%. I think they know that they're going to have to do something, and the rumors have been swirling since last fall that they would. I think that the public and the teachers as well, their patience is worn thin with the kind of things that have been happening with our teachers and our public school employees. The North Carolina ranks number 46th in the nation in teacher pay, 48th in new teacher pay. A year ago, only Oklahoma, Mississippi, and South Dakota had lower teacher pay than North Carolina. In addition to that, during the time that all of these pay changes were happening, North Carolina has increased class size. They've taken away the incentives for teachers to receive their master's degrees. They have offered. Sorry, lost my place there. I apologize. A number of things that have demoralized our teachers. As a result, this particular session, I think you will see a pay raise coming out of our legislature. But let's go back to what was happening. Teachers are beginning to leave our state, especially along the border counties. Those in Charlotte and Mecklenburg, in Rutherford, in Madison County, and places like that along the borders, our teachers are finding jobs in other states that pay more. There are teachers that I've heard from that are leaving to take $10,000 more in pay to go to South Carolina, for example. That's a sad state of affairs. I think it's a travesty when only 6 or 8 years ago, North Carolina's teacher pay was in the middle of the pack nationwide. So I believe that it's been handled poorly. In addition, the legislature is now talking about raising the starting teacher salary about 15% over 2 years, and I'm glad they're doing that. That's a good start. However, what I think you'll have is a significant change in what some people call a bell curve for salaries, where you normally have some at the lower end and it increases in the middle and then it kind of goes in this other direction. When you push the starting pay up but you don't do anything about the people in the middle and you don't do anything about people in the end, you're suddenly going to have people starting here, very little increase, and then dropping right off, and there's going to be nothing that keeps them here. And I think you're going to find the same thing, that people are going to other states to do the same thing that they're doing in North Carolina. It seems to me that there's no incentive for people to stay. The system has been set up to fail. I believe that there is a concerted effort to privatize schools, and that they are doing everything they can at the legislative level to take our public school system to a private system. And the state constitution rather says that we offer a free public education, not a free private education. The tenure system in particular, I'll talk a little bit about that. People mistakenly think that it guarantees a teacher a lifetime job once he or she gets tenure in the system. It does not. What what it does is guarantees them due process. It says, for example, that if you make a mistake or you get on the wrong side of an issue, your principal doesn't like the way you're doing something, or a parent gets crosswise of an issue that you've addressed in a classroom, it says that you can't be automatically terminated and asked to hit the door. The current legislature, I think, is eroding morale, demonizing our education. They've said that the performance is not up to snuff, that these contracts that they're preparing to offer, only 25% of our teachers will get them. That's saying that 75% of the teachers are not up to snuff. And I think you know that that's not true. If our public school teachers had the same freedoms that the independent schools, the private schools, the charter schools had, they could perform differently. If they didn't have to take
Thank
every
you, Mr.
child-
Lavender.
Thank you.
Senator Haas.
Well, I'm actually going to begin by saying thank you. Thank you for this event. Thank you for this opportunity to come speak. Chet, we appreciate this. You've done a lot of hard work to put this together. And thank you all for coming out. A lot of people want to take a measure of public education in North Carolina by saying, how much did we spend? This is what we need to look at. How much money did we pour into it? No one wants to look at those outcomes. No one wants to put responsibility for our children and making sure they receive a better education. Ask any business owner here. If I said, here was your work structure. When you have an employee for 3 years, you can't fire them anymore. You can't get rid of them. Not to mention, you can't pay any of those individuals more if they're a better employee. The only thing you can do is pay them based on the number of years they've been with your company. Now, how many people think that's a system to motivate the best work out of your employees? Well, that's what we have in the state of North Carolina with our pay scale and our tenure system. My opponent wants to say, well, it's not really, it's about due process. Of 100,000 teachers in the state of North Carolina, each year, less than 17 are terminated for cause. Less than 0.1% in a year. I don't know what kind of better interview system they think they have, but no other business works in those margins. It is a guarantee of a job. We begin to change that. We want a system in place in North Carolina that pays better teachers more, that allows us to recruit and retain the best teachers. We have a teacher pay scale in North Carolina that ranges from a starting minimum salary of $30,800 to over $91,000. There is not a pay problem at every level of teaching. We're coming in and we're addressing the entry-level teacher salaries. But we don't spend money just because we feel like it's a good idea to spend money. We spend money based on the revenue of the state. And as the economy's improved, as we change things in the budget, we've had more money to put it in. So the first funds that are coming in, we're putting to entry-level teacher salaries. I refuse to continue to operate in a system that tries to evaluate its success by how much you spend on it. It is time we start evaluating the success of our school systems by how well students perform. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be for Senator Haas first. The current legislature voted to spend more on education in this year's budget than ever before. Critics say that education has been cut. As a senator, what is your position on these two statements, and what do you think the legislature needs to do to address an education spending?
First of all, I will say it's kind of amazing when you sit down with the state budget how many unique accounting procedures the Democrats could have put in the past. When I came on, and remember in 2011 is when I took office here, since I have been in office in 2011, we have never cut a single dime in K-12 education spending. Matter of fact, in this year's budget, we spend more than $300 million more in K-12 education than has been spent in any year in the history of the state of North Carolina. Now, that's not what you're going to hear from the media. It's definitely not what you're going to hear from my opponent. It's coming forward. They want to go back to numbers in 2009, when we had Joe Sam Queen representing us here in this area. And they put in these things called budget management flexibility cuts. They put $600 million in the budget, and then they said, oh wait, but you have to send it back at the end of the year. So we're going to send it to you, but you have to send it back. And so they're comparing the number that included the money they had to send back with the number we've actually spent. Budget management flexibility actually grew until we eliminated it last year, of $1 billion being sent to public schools that had to be sent back at the end of the year. Also, the year in 2009 was that year they put in the nice little 1 cent quote-unquote temporary tax that we forced Bev Perdue to keep her promise on and allowed it to expire in 2 years. What they don't tell you is that year she also froze an additional 3% of funding that was sent to the schools and said they had to revert that back at the end of the year. So if you compare to the appropriated number, which is what's going on in most of these discussions, then you're saying, well, there's a cut. But if you compare to actual dollars the schools actually received, as a whole, they've received more. Some schools have lost enrollment numbers. We do fund on enrollment. More students are in the system. But we are spending, with a flat budget amount, we are spending more on K-12 education. Something can't be said in any other areas of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Lavender.
Thank you. In 2010, when Senator Heiss ran for this district, he is quoted as saying, "I will be a strong supporter of public schools and community colleges. However, if you can call me a cynic or a critic if you want, but here are the facts, Mr. Chairman. There are approximately 22,200 students in this district. In 2009, and I'm going to give them every year for you so you'll know, in state spending, this is not federal spending, this is not local spending, this is state spending per pupil, $5,703.70 in 2009. In 2010, $52.31. I'll leave off the cents here. In 2011, $51.61. 2012, $53.61. 2013, $53.99. Again, from 2009 to now, $304 less per pupil. If you need the citation, I can give it to you. These aren't cooked numbers; these are actual numbers. If you calculate that, that amounts to, with 22,200 students in this district approximately, that amounts to $6,748,000 this year alone that this district is losing in our public schools because of the budget that Senator Heiss voted on. That's this year. If you went back to these other years when the numbers were even a little lower, it would be even more than that. If you calculated it for each year, we're talking millions and millions of dollars that our school systems have suffered because of the budgets that have been passed through the legislature in recent years. Part of the reason that I use the per pupil number is because it's very easy for Senator Heiss to stand over here and say that the number has increased. But if I came to 10 of you today and gave each of you $1, and then the next day I came to 20 of you with the same offer and said, I'm going to give you 75 cents each. Now it's 20 of you. And then the next day there are 30 of you and I'm giving you 50 cents each. The reality is you're getting less money per person. What is happening is there are more students in our system. For example, in 2008, there was 1,458,156 students. In 2013, there are 1,467,299, almost 10,000 extra students just in that 5-year period. So the reason that he can claim that there's more money going into it is because they're having to pay for more students. Our population in North Carolina is growing. The legislature is also diverting money from the lottery, as Mr. Green pointed out. They are using money that was intended for the school system, for construction and so forth. putting it back into other means. And they've also been paying for vouchers. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to point out about that. Again, the Constitution guarantees a free public education, not a free private education. It may interest you to know, and I want you to know I'm not trying to race bait when I say this, but I think people would be surprised in this little conservative mountain community if they knew, for example, that of the first 5,000 applications or approximately that were submitted for this scholarship money, voucher money, that approximately 250 of those applications came from two schools, one in Greensboro, one in Raleigh. They were Islamic. 250 applications from Greensboro Islamic Academy and the Al-Imam Academy that plan to teach in non-English, their classes not in English, and are teaching Muslim in their school. Now, I suspect that most people in these rural counties wouldn't be happy if they knew that their rural tax dollars were going to pay for a private education in non-English and in Muslim religious education. Now, in addition to that, the teacher pay, I believe that we need to begin looking at COLAs on an annual basis, cost of living adjustments. Instead of doing these once every few years and giving a huge one when we do as a state, we need to look at the cost of living and try to get every year a reasonable cost of living adjustment consistent with what the cost of living is actually going up, so that we're not in a position where our teachers and our school employees are falling behind every year in what their salaries are. We need to.
Thank you, Mr. Lavender. This question goes to Mr. Lavender first. North Carolina received the largest tax cuts in history of the state during the Republican-controlled legislature. Do you think the legislature overreached in tax reform, or has the legislature cut enough?
There are lots of ways that Senator Heiss and I are alike. We're both for the Second Amendment. We're both pro-life. We both believe that the loopholes in our tax system need to be changed. But the one place that I think we disagree on a little bit is the tax plan that was put into place last year. Not that they're cuts. I think the issue is that they created a flat tax system. Now, to some, that sounds fair. But what most people don't stop to consider is that a flat tax system unduly puts a burden on the lower class and the middle class. Fortunately, they did take an exception, make an exception by changing the personal exemption so that those in the lower class would be able to be helped a little bit. However, the whole system there in a flat tax system is that again, in the progressive, when you make a little, you pay a lower rate. As you get to a higher income, you pay a higher rate. But what they've done in North Carolina now is to flatten that out so that the people that make 100 and 200 and 300 and 400,000 and more are paying a flat rate that's consistent with what you and I pay, making $15,000 and $20,000 and $30,000 a year. In addition to that, they've added sales taxes on goods and services, and I think you'll continue to see that. Maybe not this year because it's an election year, but I think next year that's likely to happen. When you do that and you're having a flat tax system where you're wealthy or not paying as much in, the revenue's coming from somewhere, so you're unduly placing a middle class squeeze and to some extent the lower class with a flat tax system. I don't support that flat tax program. In addition, they've lowered corporate taxes at the same time they've lowered personal income taxes. Now, in an economy like we have right now, that's a risky move. If you followed the news this week, you've noticed that the revenue is not coming in on the income tax the way they thought it was. The sales tax is up a little bit, but the personal income tax is down a little bit. Now, Senator Heiss will tell you that that's because people changed their personal exemptions and that it'll be made up for next spring when people file their taxes. Maybe, maybe not. But it's a big risk to take to do that at the same time you're lowering the corporate tax. In my opinion, that we need to go back to what the good book says. And to whom much is given, much is expected. If you make $300,000 a year, you can afford to pay more. I don't think it's unfair to expect that. The average person expects to have a good education system for their kids. They expect to have a good public safety. And while I mentioned that Senator Heiss voted to cut out the communication system in Asheville. In these mountain counties, that's risky because our law enforcement needs to know that when they're on a mountaintop or in a mountain valley, that they can get their communications properly. Now they're having to call Newton. Ask most of the people in law enforcement, and they'll tell you they think that was a risky move. But I go back. People expect good services for their kids, good services for their public safety, and a number of other things. And I believe that to do both the personal income tax, the corporate income tax, and to lower what the wealthy pay all at the same time was a risky move, and that's where he and I would disagree. I'll use the remainder of my time to mention a couple of things that I didn't get to on the other. I think we need to make sure that our classrooms have books, supplies, and technology, that we have teacher assistants in the lower grades, and that our classroom size is brought down. This legislature has increased class size. We need to recognize that performance is not a one-size-fits-all. You can't expect to put the same amount of money into a McDowell County system with folks whose parents didn't have a high school education, that haven't had the same kind of experiences that someone whose parents are lawyers and doctors in Charlotte have. We need to understand that minorities and low income are where the folks are performing poorly and need to do something about it.
Thank you. Senator Heiss.
Thank you. I guess I'll first say that my first disagreement would probably be that we agree on a lot of things kind of in this operation. I don't hear many people other than President Obama going out and claiming how we have a tax system that doesn't charge the wealthy enough and they're not paying their fair share, and that we need a more progressive tax system. I couldn't disagree more. We have a tax system that is not competitive with any state that borders us. Gasoline tax, sales tax, corporate income tax, all higher here in the state of North Carolina, exception of Tennessee sales tax. All higher. And we're trying to recruit businesses into this area, to this district that borders both Tennessee and South Carolina. We had a plant trying to come to the eastern part of the state. Governor Perdue offered a tire plant, 3,500 jobs. She offered cash upfront payments of $40 million. They went to South Carolina. Why? Lower tax rates. You want to fix the problems with our revenue, fix the problems with our economy, and make our businesses competitive. We took a giant step in that direction this time in the legislature. We took the personal income tax rate from a top rate of 7.75 to a rate of 5.8%. A tax cut for everyone in the state who pays taxes. I've not yet figured out how to do tax cuts for people who don't pay tax, but for every person who pays tax, that was a tax cut. We took our corporate rate from almost 7% to 5.75 to become competitive for the first time with Virginia in corporate tax rates. But we are not done. If you think this first step was the end of it, then I'm probably not somebody you want to support. We are finished with tax reform in the state of North Carolina when we have eliminated the personal and corporate income tax. When we have a tax system in the state of North Carolina that charges taxes as you spend your funds on a flat across-the-board sales tax and not challenges success, that doesn't look at every business and say the more successful you are, the more we're going to take away from you. So that we can compete with Tennessee, who doesn't have a personal income tax, or Florida or Texas. So we can have a corporate income tax that makes... We have a corporate income tax in this nation that is competitive with no other industrialized nation. It is higher in the United States than any other industrialized nation. You add on top of that North Carolina had one higher than any in the Southeast, and ask how we bring industry here. When we eliminate ours, we not only become competitive nationally, we can start to become competitive internationally. With bringing businesses here. This tax reform is a step in a direction that we have to move as a state of North Carolina. We don't have revenue because when I started this, every county I represented had an unemployment rate over 10%. You know why you don't have revenue? Because you don't have individuals working in jobs. And until you change that factor and you make us competitive and people can come back to work, then you can start reducing the spending on your social programs and your federal mandates, and you can develop the revenue to invest in education and other things. It's a cart and a horse concept. My opponent wants to focus on, well, we just need to spend more, spend more. It's a hole that keeps building and building year after year. You have got to build your base, and tax structure is one of the options we have to do that in the state. Thank you.
Senator Heiss. Medicaid is seen as the driver of the current state budget in many people's eyes. What can the legislature do to control Medicaid spending and get control of this significant tax burden? As a senator, what suggestions do you have to help North Carolina's Medicaid crisis?
North Carolina's health care system, which is Medicaid. In a given year, 2.1 million people in the state will be in Medicaid. 60% of the births that happen in a year in North Carolina occur on Medicaid. That's how large of a program it is now. It's an entitlement. Entitlements don't fit well with the rest of the budget. We don't get to control as a state who's eligible for it, only when the Supreme Court lets us make that decision once. And we don't get to control what they spend. Every Medicaid recipient runs to the emergency room tomorrow, we're in trouble in the state of North Carolina. We just have to pay the bill. 1/3 state dollars, 2/3 federal dollars. We got to keep up in spending with the federal government in the healthcare arena. And it is growing faster than anything we have in the budget. Now, Obama's idea for the state was, well, you know, it's just not quite big enough. You need to expand Medicaid by another 600,000 people so that it fits well into our Obamacare plan. We told President Obama if he liked his expansion, he could keep it. And we rejected that concept. That would have moved us to 1 out of every 4 people in the state of North Carolina on Medicaid. You add to that the state health plan and others, we would be comparable to Blue Cross and Blue Shield in the state. Now there's a lot of things that I think we need to do in Medicaid. The problem is every one of them you try, you have to submit what's called a state plan amendment to the federal government, and CMS, who's headed by someone whose name's been in the news a lot today, Kathleen Sebelius. She left today. Thank heavens for small miracles. But there's another Obama appointee looking to fill that position. Now she has to approve everything North Carolina chooses to do. I'm not real good at going and begging, not to the Obama administration. So until Congress, if you want to change Medicaid in the state of North Carolina, change your U.S. Senate. Send Kay Hagan home. Talk to your congressman. It is time to block grant Medicaid to the states and get the federal government out of the decision making. If they're going to drive our budget with it, they can at least let us make the decisions in our community. But we continue to fight. The Affordable Care Act cost us in this 2-year budget $1.5 billion in an expansion of the population that wasn't in the Medicaid expansion and additional cost. Now we have a $20 billion annual budget of state dollars. And over 2 years, we got to spend $1.5 million more Medicaid. We also have an IT system that did not started under Purdue in North Carolina, started under the Easley administration. NC Tracks. They bid that program originally for $90 million. Said it'd take 2 years to complete. It unfortunately went live July 1st. 7 years they built this system to a cost of $600 million. And it doesn't work. I've got providers all over the state. Mission Hospital contacted me last week. They're owed $90 million in payments they've not received. We estimate that there is close to $400 million in unpaid claims in the system right now. That's the challenge we're facing. Everybody gets to, well, the one person who's in charge. There are 18,000 employees at the Department of Health and Human Services. Only 65 were originally exempt from the State Personnel Act. We've upped that to about 500 now. Those people that we were here before you, we'll be here after you, hang on to those job protections. We've made some people mad with doing that. Might be why the State Employee Union has supported my opponent. We've made some changes in that area, but it's going to take some time to fix because we've still got the Democrat administration that wrote these contracts we're obligated to. But I've been chosen by my colleagues in the Senate to chair Health and Human Services, both the health policy side and the appropriations side. Just my second term. And I will tell you that I've been focused on nothing more in the 2 terms I've been down there than trying to change and turn this ship that is Medicaid.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Lavender.
Thank you. It seems obvious to me that the first and foremost thing we need to do is to put people back to work. When this economy has the number of people that it has out of work, those people don't have insurance. There are also people who are underemployed and working for businesses that haven't been incentivized to keep health insurance in their companies. Right now, for example, Rutherford County and Mitchell County still have over 9% unemployment in both of those counties. We have got to get people back to work, and particularly with good paying jobs that have benefits like insurance. If they're working with insurance, they're off the Medicaid rolls. You know, it's ironic to me too that the senator talks about the number of employees that have been exempted, and you know, and then he talks about the teachers. You know, it's very obvious to anybody that's followed the DHHS debacle that there are problems at DHHS. And what does Senator Heiss do? If you followed him at all last year, there were several times where the newspapers were asking questions about Dr. Vosh, who is over DHHS, and he said, well, if people would just leave her alone, she could get her job done. Well, everybody that's been in that position before as DHHS secretary has had questions. And they answered them. They even have staff that's their entire job to answer those questions. He defended her. In my opinion, that's the second thing you do. You get people back to work, and then you get a leader at DHHS who knows how to handle these issues. She may have been a great physician, she may have been a friend to the governor, but she is not a leader that knows what to do with our Medicaid system. She had an opportunity, as he said, that NC track system took forever to develop and went over budget, but leading right up to the implementation, folks said, it is not ready, it won't work. Dr. Vosh said, we're gonna go live. We're gonna go live, we're gonna do it. And she did it, and it didn't work. There were doctors who left the system because they couldn't get paid. Their Employees needed a paycheck. They borrowed money to pay their payroll. And at a certain point when they weren't getting paid, they said, I got to get out of this because I can't continue to take that kind of loss. The third thing I think is that we have to deal with the waste and fraud in Medicaid. I'm sure the senator is aware that there are millions of dollars that are collected each year from people that have frauded the system, not just people who have received Medicaid that weren't supposed to be receiving Medicaid, but also doctors who filed fraudulent claims. And those millions of dollars are just the tip of the iceberg. Those are just the ones that they reclaimed money from. It surprises me that in an effort to try to shore up money for the system, that they haven't hired more people to go after the fraud and abuse in that system. We also, I think, need to incentivize businesses to offer insurance. So many people, when the Affordable Care Act came along, they bailed. They saw that the cost would be high. I think we need to figure out some basic insurance plans and get our businesses to offer them some type of incentive. And at the very least, if we're going to offer a corporate tax reduction, we need to say, if you're going to get a corporate tax reduction, then you need to offer health insurance for your employees. The state shouldn't be picking up Medicaid because your employees don't make enough money, but yet we're going to give you a corporate tax reduction. If we're going to give them a reduction, then they at least need to offer health insurance. Another thing we need to do that goes back to education, in my opinion, is to work on the number of people who are dropping out in high school. Those people are not finding jobs. In my opinion, it's high time that we need to say compulsory education to the age of 18. When those people don't find jobs, they don't have money for insurance, they're ending up eventually on the Medicaid rolls. If we can get them to stay in school and to be productive and work in our economy, we can help keep them off of Medicaid and work to create a better system there. With that, I'll stop.
Thank you. Mr. Lavender, education and Medicaid are the hottest topics in state government. These two issues cause many to forget the other essential services such as public safety, road construction, and economic issues. What should North Carolina do to enhance the essential services and provide the basic government responsibility of providing a safe and vibrant future for our state?
Well, you may laugh, Mr. Chairman, but I'll go back to what I just said a minute ago. We need to get people back to work. Senator Heiss has not been proactive in this area. He has been involved in Raleigh in the budget and DHHS and so forth, but he has not been active in recruiting the jobs he promised several years ago. He promised people in this area, particularly in his own home county, that he would work to create jobs. It's not happened. We need to work to create more opportunities for jobs, because that's the way we get our economy back on its feet. In addition to that, I think we have to begin to look at doing some things that would make our businesses more productive, such as, and it's one that Senator Heiss mentioned, and I found it so odd when he said it. He talked about our gasoline or fuel taxes. I've thought for a long time that our gasoline tax was way too high. Senator Heiss has been there 3.5 years. He's had the opportunity to file a bill to lower our gasoline tax. He hasn't done it. In fact, there was a time just a couple of years ago when the House passed a bill, tried to send it over to the Senate, and the Senate wouldn't take it up. I think we need to lower that tax. We need to cap it. It may interest you to know that one of the ways they calculate that, and it's adjusted every 6 months, is they have a base figure, and on top of that base, they charge you 7% of the wholesale price of gasoline. So when the oil companies are gouging you, they're going to gouge you 7% more. I think that's absolutely wrong, and I think it's amazing that he stands up here and tells you that that we shouldn't have a gasoline tax that high when he's had 3 years to do something about it, and he hasn't. When you're a businessman and you're trying to get a product to market, whether it's a chair or whether it's a microphone or whatever it is, you have to pay to transport that to market. You have to add that transportation in your cost. If the gasoline tax is high, both state and federal, then your product is going to cost more. So I would work to lower that gasoline tax. In addition to that, we need to make sure that our roads are good in all areas of the state. But Senator Heiss voted for the transportation formula to be redone last year. That formula basically says that those areas that are experiencing high growth in population and high growth in jobs, in a certain percentage of that money, that those areas will get that money. And if you know anything about these mountain counties, we're not experiencing high growth. We're not experiencing a high number of jobs. Look at the unemployment rate. You can tell that. So where do you think that's going? That's going to the urban areas that are experiencing that, the Raleighs of the world, the Mecklenburgs, and so forth. We need our fair share of good roads, and people in this area and people in the eastern part of the state are just as concerned. Now, he will tell you that the money used to all go to one district in eastern North Carolina because of a Democrat. Well, if you believe that, come back and check the logs. Our county has to approve the road that are being redone each year, and we can go back and pull those logs and show you that there has been road construction and roads that are repaved over the years. The reality is that money is, the flow is stopping, and it will get even more scarce under the plan that Senator Heiss voted for. Other things, the Golden Leaf money that was intended for rural counties to supplant tobacco money. This district has been the recipient of about $15 million in grants over the last decade to help our rural counties. If you have a student in the high schools right now, the one-on-one project, if you know what I'm talking about there, that was funded through Golden Leaf money with some local match by the county. There are many other projects that have taken place in all 6 counties, $15 million. The legislatures voted to take that money back from Golden Leaf. These are things that are hurting our rural counties. In addition, I disagree with the basic premise that education and Medicaid are not tied to these other services, Mr. Chairman, because when we don't have a good education system in the long term, our economy suffers. When our businesses...
Thank you, Mr. Lavender. Senator Heiss.
Thank you. Sometimes I struggle to understand if someone's being deceitful or just doesn't understand what's going on. We begin with a couple things I'll address. Golden Leaf. Matter of fact, on a public information request, when he asked Golden Leaf director the question, had the loss of funds had any impact on the amount of grants they were giving out, he was told no. Golden Leaf has a fund balance of $800 million sitting on the sidelines that they don't spend. So when we stopped $45 million in additional money coming to them because we used it in the budget, it didn't change any of the plans Golden Leaf they had. Matter of fact, they're still not even touching the fund balance. They're just spending the interest off of it. Now, if you think the situation we're in state government is something that inclines itself to say we should allow these nonprofits to build billion-dollar trusts just to spend the interest, then you don't understand the severity of what we're going through in the state and what we've been fighting. Fraud. We talked about fraud. Why don't we do more in fraud? Well, there's another federal problem in Medicaid and unemployment insurance. If we identify fraud in the Medicaid system, we start a clock ticking. within 1 year, if we're not able to recover those funds, we have to pay the federal part, which is twice as much as we paid to begin with, to the federal government. Because we identified a fraudulent payment, so now we have to pay their share. If we don't pay it back, if unemployment's made out and we identify it as fraudulent, we have to pay the federal government for what they paid in unemployment insurance. We had an unemployment insurance system that was almost $3 billion in debt to the federal government. Businesses all over had seen their unemployment insurance double and triple in a 3-year period, and it would continue to do it until that debt was paid off. So we made cuts to the unemployment system. We will now have that debt paid off by 2016. And we'll be able to cut what businesses are being charged every pay period for unemployment insurance. What they weren't having to pay in South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia. We've got to make it competitive. Transportation funding. Now, anybody who looks at the transportation funding formula we had previously will tell you two things. One, it was driven by Democrats because all funding decisions were given to what are called RPOs and MPOs, regional planning organizations, metropolitan planning organizations, and that the entire system was designed, there are 14 districts in the state. One got a larger share than any other district in the state, and it was District 1. Mark Bass Knight's district in the North Carolina Senate. So we said it's time to change the entire basis on which we decide funding formulas. How about we make this a data-driven decision based on needs in the state? Now, he wants to point out some of the things that are on there that are favoring urban areas like congestion. But how about safety, which is a higher percentage point? What's the most dangerous road in the state of North Carolina? Drive from Marion to Baxter's every day, you'll see it. Cox's Creek. And fatalities. And the fact that we can start getting roads looked at in western North Carolina because we're looking at how dangerous they are. Generally a factor of 10 higher than anywhere else in the state. So we set across statewide projects. Some things may happen in urban areas. But I-26 connecting through Asheville finally, and hopefully in my lifetime, is a benefit to everyone in western North Carolina because businesses travel that. It's made one of the top funding requests now in the state. That we can focus on 74, which runs through Rutherford County. That we got the funding for 19E in place before the funding formula occurred means that we will receive in Madison, Yancey, Mitchell counties $400 in additional transportation funds $400 million in additional transportation funds to complete that project before we implement those the new transportation reform. That's what we fought for in the legislature. Now either they're unaware of that or somebody's telling you a completely different story that's moving forward. We have to fix things in the state. We have to focus on jobs and the economy. That is our number one issue. It has always been our number one issue. That is what we focus on. That is what drives spending on education. That's what drives
Senator.
moving forward. Thank you all for the opportunity tonight.
Before we cut off our recording, we have a couple other candidates who are present who do not have a primary that we would like to introduce. First, we would like to introduce Representative Josh Dobson for a brief word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the key word is brief. But before I do that, let's give these two candidates and our county commissioner candidates one more round of applause. It's not easy to stand up here and do what they did tonight. It's really not. And their willingness to step forward. And I will be real brief. Two things I want to say real quick. First thing is I heard a United States Senator the other day talk about moderating our social positions when it comes to things like pro-life, pro-gun, pro-marriage amendment, things like that. I think that's exactly the wrong approach. There's some things, thank you. Some things we can look at, we can negotiate on, but there's some things that are not. And that's some of those things. So I think we need to keep going, particularly in Western North Carolina with our conservative social policies. The second thing I'll say, I do have an opponent in November, and I would appreciate your support. The only promise I make is that when it comes time to vote, I'm not going to ask myself which PAC can give me the most money based on the way that I vote or anything like that. It's going to be what's best for rural Western North Carolina. And that's what I plan on doing. Is it good for Avery, Mitchell, McDowell County? If it is, I'm going to vote yes. If it's not, I'm going to vote no. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate your attendance tonight as well. Thank you.
We have with us tonight Ted Bell, candidate for District Attorney.
Thank you, Chet, and thank you, everyone. My name is Ted Bell, and I am the Republican candidate for District Attorney on the ballot in November. Basically, I'm running for District Attorney, focusing on three things. First, I believe the District Attorney should be accessible and responsive to the people who he serves. If you need to speak to the District Attorney, you should be able to reach the District Attorney. Second, I think the District Attorney's office should be work closer with law enforcement, have a better working relationship with law enforcement. Law enforcement officers shouldn't find out months after the fact that the case that they were working on was pled out or dismissed without them even knowing it. Third, I believe that we should be smarter and tougher in fighting crime. I think that we should use a more targeted approach, a more proactive approach in fighting crime, and we should make it tougher on criminals in McDowell County so that when they think about hitting a house and breaking into a place, they decide that it's better to go down the road to Burke County because it's going to be too tough to break into a house here, and they don't want to deal with the consequences. I want to export our crime like we used to, unfortunately, export our jobs. I want us to be reading in the newspaper articles about criminals that were tried and convicted for the crimes that they committed instead of reading all these articles about plea bargains week after week after week. I thank you for your support. My website is tedbell4da.com, and I would gratefully appreciate it if you will go on, look it up, read what I have to say, and then I appreciate your vote in November. Thank you.
Our sheriff is unopposed this year, and I'm going to ask him to come real quick and just say a hello, just so everybody don't forget his face.
Well, thank you, Chad, and thank you all. Let me echo that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for taking an interest in what's happening. And aren't we fortunate to have the group of candidates for commissioner and North Carolina Senate that have been represented here tonight? Let's give them a hand. And to the folks with the party about putting this event together, thank you all for that. My name is Dudley Green, and I do have the opportunity to serve as your sheriff. You may also know, if you've read the McDowell News the last day or two, I'm also the ACLU's latest pen pal. But at any rate, they got a little bit ahead of themselves about misunderstanding that just because you don't have something in writing doesn't mean you don't have plans underway. And I hope we explained that we are underway with some things by working together with the commissioners and the county to try to. 6 years ago, when I took this job on, we established a mission statement for the McDowell County Sheriff's Office. And part of that dealt with the very thing that that ACLU issue brought up. And our mission statement is a statement that we're going to continue to try to live up to each and every day. And it just simply says to be good neighbors to the citizens we serve by working in cooperation with partner agencies to provide efficient and effective law enforcement, safe and secure court and detention facilities, and that was the very thing that dealt with, and other programs to promote the public safety and welfare of our community. And I appreciate the opportunity to serve. That's what we intend to do in a new term. And again, it's good to be here with you, and I appreciate the privilege to serve as your sheriff. Thank you.
This recording was paid for by the McDowell County Republican Party. Thank you for joining us this evening.